Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we completely missed what's going on, which you can do by visiting us on unsilentpodcast.com, on Rumble, where there's a great comment section, or various social media channels. So, Brian, I think you got some stuff queued up for us to take a look at today, don't you?
Yeah, I got, there's an interview that was done, I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or it was some kind of thing like that back in 1985, I think, might be 1984. It's an interview with a guy named Yuri Brezmenov, who defected from the Soviet Union, I think in 1971. And he's talking to this reporter about the Soviet Union's plan to kind of destabilize and kind of, what was it, Lincoln or Reagan? One of them said, like, the U.S. can't fall from without, we can only fall from within, that kind of a thing, right?
Right.
And he basically scripts out, if they could wave their magic wand, how they would do it, and kind of implies, if I'm understanding what he says correctly, and of course you can chime in where if that's not true, but and basically implies how it's unfolding in 1985, and the parallels are significant, I think. So it's 12 minutes long. I've got it broken up into different parts, but I thought it'd be fun just kind of listen to what he says for a minute or two at a time, and then just kind of pause it and chat about it a little bit. Yeah. I find this to be extremely interesting. Just if it's not planned, it's awfully coincidental. Let's just put it that way. So so I'm gonna share my screen here, and here's a picture of Yuri. Again, I think he's a former KGB guy. So I'm starting this about a minute in. It's about 13 and a half minutes long, but I got queued up about a minute in, and I'm going to play about a minute and a half here, and then I'll pause it. We can talk about what he says here. So here we go.
According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
Okay. So so far what he's saying then is well, you tell me what you think he's saying there.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think he's saying that it's a long-term process to make a country fall from within, to change how they think and how they feel, in order to bring about an irreversible slide in the direction of the quote-unquote enemy, and in the direction of the folks that are their adversaries. And it's remarkable. It was remarkable to me that the frustration of sharing just common sense, logical stuff. You and I talk about this all the time. It's like A plus B equals C seems so common sense. 1 + 1 = 2 seems so common sense. Why can't anybody understand this? And his point is, look, if you brainwashed them long enough, you can't convince them with logic.
Right. Well, and I think it's fascinating that you and I have talked before about kind of the 5 elements of the 5 forces behind what you and I would consider this kind of reshaping of values and principles and things like
Right.
that. You got Hollywood, you got the media, you got academia, which he specifically is talking about here. Then you got kind of the intelligence community, and then which might include the military industrial complex is a common word that's been around for a phrase that's been around for 80 years or so now. And then you got Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
He's specifically talking about if you get academia, those people all go into the other places,
right?
And the things that they were taught as they're rebelling against their parents, as all children do, and things that they go to this higher level education where they are. I'm implying this stuff here. He didn't say this stuff, but I imagine, having never been to college, that people who go to college see this as like the next level up, and their intelligence is being enhanced, and they know things regular people don't, and things like that. Well, if the ideas that they're being taught there that they connect to psychologically to, this makes me more sophisticated, more smarter, I have a better understanding of the world and things like that, how could they possibly give those things up? How could they possibly turn away from those things and say, no, all that stuff I learned at Yale is wrong. The farmer in Colorado, he really has it figured out.
Right.
That seems very counterintuitive.
Yeah, because it becomes your self-image. I mean, once your self-image is changed as a youth, as a young person in college, then you're right. You're not going to want to. And I think this is why it is so impossible, like he says, just to use logic to change somebody's mind about these things. And he says, it's going to take 15 to 20 years to get it to happen, because you've got all the kids going through college, and finally they're making their way into positions of power. And it's going to take another 15 to 20 years to reverse that entire process, which in particular in American culture, we are not a long-term process culture. I mean, we are,
we're very short-term gratification for sure.
Exactly.
Which I as we kind of go through this, I kind of understand how we end up in this fourth turning cycle. Because we put this stuff off. We do the fun things that feel good right now up until the moment where we absolutely cannot do those things anymore.
Right.
And then we have to act. Okay. Exactly. All right. So that's the first part where he starts talking about demoralization. He gets in that a little bit more. But first he goes into a kind of a little sidebar here that I think is pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm not editing this video. It's available for anyone to watch. I'm pulling this straight off of YouTube. It's easy to find. But all right, here we go. Here we go to the next section here.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place, and who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. They will join the links of dissenters, dissidents. Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality. This they don't understand, and it will be greatest shock for them, of course.
All right, so
Wow.
so a couple things that stood out to me there. The first one was, I don't know of any other person in 1985 who was using the phrase social justice.
That just piqued my interest when he said that.
Yeah, I don't remember social justice being a phrase I was tuned into hearing until the earliest 2010, 2008, 2005, maybe. I mean, this is going on 40 years ago. I didn't hear that phrase anywhere. And for him to use that specific word, holy smokes, did that make me go, okay, if you think some of this is like hooey and like I'm pulling up some clip and it just happens to coincide, okay, then why that phrase, right?
Right, exactly. When he said that, that really piqued my interest because it looks like that long-term plan. So somebody's pitching this right then, it doesn't really take fruition until 20, 30, 40. It'll be 40 years next year since this video was made. I mean, that's pretty staggering.
And I was just fascinated by, again, him. He paints a pretty good picture here. Like, when these people see what social justice looks like in this I'm paraphrasing here, but like this utopian idea, what it looks like in the practical sense, they will revolt, and they'll be exterminated like cockroaches,
squished like cockroaches.
And it made me think about that term "useful idiot." Like these are the folks that get us where we need to be, but once their purpose is done, like they're more of a liability than an asset at that point, and they got to go.
Well, and there's a lot of folks that have been commenting on how, this sort of Marxist ideology always creates monsters it can't control. It creates, monsters that come back and eat them. That, to you and I it's pretty obvious that, we use that phrase all the time. They wouldn't really go this far, would they? Well, that's the phrase that we use now, but that's not the phrase. That's the phrase that other people who have been pitching and pushing this kind of extreme leftism and this extreme progressivism will ultimately be using themselves as, well, wait a minute, we didn't intend to go this far. We didn't intend to, open re-education camps, but it's the natural, logical outcome of what you're doing. Now, if you explain that right now to somebody who is pushing that kind of agenda, they'll say, no, once we're here, we're going to stop. Well, when does that ever happen? It's never happened.
And he gets into how that unfolds later on here. So, all right. So let's pick it back up with Yuri here, and let's see what he's got next here. This here, I think, is one of the longer little sections we're going to listen to as well. It's about 1.5 minutes long. But fascinating stuff, I think.
The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So basically, America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism.
So what'd you hear there, Dave? What was interesting to you in that little section?
Well, well, there's quite a bit. I mean, the notion that that you could shower a person with information, with with everything that proves that your point is valid, will not even, and this is the frustration coming from our side, is, well, let's line up all these facts, let's show you comparisons, and it's like we can't even consider that. And it's like, well, why can't you see this logically? And it does go back to this. I mean, the whole idea of demoralization is not a logical process. I mean, it is logical because it follows steps, but it's not a logical process in terms of I choose to be demoralized. I've thought through this and it's a good idea. It's an emotional thing, right?
Yeah.
And once you've taken somebody down that emotional path, then taking them down a logical path to deprogram that emotional state that they're in is just a fool's errand. It's just futile. Yeah. And so it also strikes me that it's a brilliant attack. I mean, it's an incredibly brilliant attack. Now, they didn't survive because of, because they didn't have the time that they needed to, because their own system collapsed. But, had they survived.
Well, you know what, but they're still hanging on enough,
Oh, yeah.
And that's
well, the philosophy
one of the things that I think that we as Americans grossly underestimate is kind of twofold. First, if you look at things like the Middle East and China and Russia, Soviet Union, now Russia, they are playing the long game. All of them are playing the long game.
Sure.
So I think we diminish how much that's a thing. And secondly, I think we diminish how effective that is over the long time. Like we're immediate gratification folks. So if we don't see it happen next Thursday, like, well, their plan sucks because nothing's happening. We miss the big tidal movements because we're focused on the little splashes.
Well, and also I think we're focused on the players. In other words, okay, so when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s, we're like, oh, okay, communism's over. That's the end of that. We don't have to worry about it anymore. We won. Let's go out, have some pizza, and watch Rambo.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is that even if the entity that is the current entity that's sort of representing this philosophy, even if that goes away, the notion, the idea, the philosophy of the whole thing doesn't die out. It finds another home. It's like a virus, the host, the Soviet Union was the big host of that virus for a period of time, and very malign. Eventually it kills the host.
He gets into that later on also. I think one of the things that in that particular clip, a couple things stood out to me. One, he talked about how our morality is going away.
Yeah.
And, again, looking back in, 2005, 2010, 2015, I don't know that I would have said that. I mean, there was things that we were arguing about, like gay marriage and things like that we were arguing about, like what's fair and what's right and what's the individual rights versus the society's, rights and things like that. But I don't think I would have been tuned into like we were in a serious morality crisis. And he specifically states that. And now I'm like, well, yes, this is absolutely a shift in our values and principles.
Right.
That is morality, right? That absolutely makes sense. And that's where I think a few weeks ago, you and I were talking about how, conservatives who quote unquote represent us in government and things like that, they've underestimated this for decades.
Yeah.
They were playing a tactical game and the progressives were playing a fundamental morality shift game. And we thought we were arguing over tax codes, or conservatives thought they were arguing over tax codes and zoning and things like that.
Right.
They had no idea the real game that was afoot.
Right.
And then, we were talking about, a minute ago, like, he talks about how opposed these people will, if you take them to a concentration camp and show them, they will not see it. It reminded me of that. Well, I think it was Mark Twain that said, it's easier to fool a man than it is to convince a man that he's been fooled. I might not have been Mark Twain, but I think it was Mark Twain.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that really, this is the practical illustration of that. Like, this is the real life version of that happening. And, again, we in, whether it's disagreements on Facebook, you and I both get sucked into sometimes, or people who get sucked into these things. And we're speaking facts, and it just doesn't land. And it's like you said, it's frustrating. I saw a clip of Jim Jordan, congressman. He's chair of some over whatever committee, and he has a guy there who's the communications guy for the White House in a hearing, and the guy is all about, he was part of the crew that was, I think, if I am understanding correctly, that was helping facilitate behind the scenes Facebook and Twitter, all these squashing quote unquote misinformation and disinformation. So Jim Jordan asked him, like they went round and round for like 5 minutes. He's asking him, what is misinformation? What is disinformation? The guy would not define it, right?
Right.
And he later asked him, well, when the Biden administration said that if you would die if you didn't get the COVID vaccine, was that misinformation or disinformation? And the guy just it feels like he's purposely dodging the question. But after listening to this Yuri Brezmenov, I'm like, maybe he just can't see it. Maybe he just can't see that it's the practical logic part that is the disconnect. And he's just for utopian outcome of like, well, yeah, but it's not misinformation. If we do it, we were doing the best we can, is what he kept saying. We're working on the best information we could.
Yeah.
But if people do it and something we don't like, that's obviously misinformation. And just completely either unaware or just like flat out lying. And I always tend to believe that they're lying, but sometimes I have to like listen to this guy and I go, maybe they're just maybe they're just not, just like if you took them and showed them the concentration camp, they wouldn't believe it.
Right.
Same kind of thing unfolding there.
I think I think what happens more than I have ever realized before, the last certain number of years, I think I've realized it a lot more, is that certain things just bounce off the worldview. So you've got this worldview, and it's kind of like the shields on the Enterprise, and somebody fires something at you and it just bounces off because it doesn't. So it's the filter. It's and anything that doesn't pass through the filter doesn't even come into vision. So it's very probable, like in the hearing you're talking about, I haven't seen it, but I can envision Jordan talking and saying these things, asking these questions. And it's kind of like somebody speaking Chinese to the guy and he doesn't even understand Chinese. So it's not.
He kept saying we were working with the best information we could. Okay, but if a citizen does that and they post a thing on Facebook, you told Facebook to take it down.
Right.
Okay,
right.
But when you do it, we were doing the best we can.
Right. Because and part of that worldview, I think it goes back to our previous conversation a few minutes ago. Part of that worldview is of if you are an elite, if you are in a power situation, you believe you're there because you are better equipped than the people who are challenging you. And so it's just like, I think in centuries past, the divine right of kings. Somebody comes and challenges you as a king and they have some good information. It's like, well, but you're challenging me. Well, yeah, but my information is better, but you're challenging me. You can't do that.
I'm the king.
We can't even get to the point where that's considered because you can't get past that vector that says you're challenging me. So self-perception and self-image that is emotionally attached is a bigger, you and I would like to think that somebody comes to me with some contradictory information, that my mind would be strong enough to overcome my emotional attachment to what I previously knew. I think that's true. I could be self-deceived, but I think that's true.
I don't think it would be true necessarily on a case-by-case basis, but I think what you and I would hope for is that the pattern that evolved over time of this, if this happened 100 times, 87 times out of 100, I would do it right. 13, I'm only human. I'm going to get it wrong.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what conservatives have missed too. I think that's what going back to talking about zoning laws and tax rates and, all this kind of stuff. I think that's what this side that I happen to be with, that you and I are on, have missed, is if they just had better information, then they wouldn't go down this road that's going to lead to disaster. Well, no, that information can't be considered. If they would consider it, sure, but it can't even be admitted into the door.
Yeah. I watched a similar thing last night on a quick little thing. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I saw this thing on TV. It was, a gal who's like, we need to, like, the Elon Musk Trump interview happened. They were like, we can't be having this misinformation. And he asked the gal, well, who should get to decide? And she just could not. Again, it was like the photon torpedo bouncing off the Enterprise force field or whatever. Shield. Yeah. Like, and he asked her like 4 times. Like, okay, I get what you're saying, but who should decide? Well, there needs to be in place a methodology to stop this misinformation. Great. But who will get to decide what misinformation is? Well, obviously it's with Elon Musk and Twitter. Obviously that's going to be misinformation. She just could not answer the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Well, and that's the frustrating part.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is for me. All right. Let's see what Yuri's got next here for us. This here is going to be about 50 seconds here. So now he's moving on to the next phase after demoralization.
The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast.
All right, so he's talking here about destabilization, specifically about economy, foreign affairs, and what was the third thing you said?
And defense.
Defense, yeah. Okay.
Defense, yeah.
And it's a 2 to 5 year process. Okay, Dave, what 2 to 5 year process has been unfolding in a big way, or that has to do with the economy and defense?
Well, I mean, where do you want to start? I mean, for me,
it was like the border. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have a more taking what he said. Like, to destabilize a nation takes 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's got to be things that affect the economy, foreign relations, and defense.
Yeah, and obviously,
we literally don't have a border in the South. Well, arguably in the North now either, but specifically in the South. Like, they sued the state of Texas and forced the state of Texas to stop mitigating the immigration.
Right. Yeah, that touches every one of those. I mean, and it seems to me, if Yuri were around now, I don't know if he's still alive or not. Probably not.
He died like 20 years ago or something, 30 years ago.
So it would seem to me that if he was around now and he talked about the destabilization process, he would be able to look at from 2008 till today and pick out so many points, whether it's economically 2008 was self-inflicted, with the different, programs that essentially caused the subprime mortgage crisis that's self-inflicted. So it's economic.
Yeah.
And it was done in the name of social justice.
Yeah.
So, 2008, people thought it's a greedy corporation. No, 2008 was because of social justice and the economy, forcing banks to give loans to people that couldn't pay them back. And if you talked about it, you were raised. So there's economy there. You look at COVID, look at any of these destabilizing things that we've happened ever since then.
Well, just you're getting ahead of yourself here, Dave. Wait till you hear the next.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, I haven't seen this clip, so this is all new to me. So
so we got demoralization and then destabilization, and now he talks about this is only about 1 minute and 4 seconds, but he moves on to what are the next couple of stages. He goes through these two here pretty quickly, but let's see what Yuri's got to say here.
The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not.
All right, so now we've got crisis, which takes only 6 weeks, which we saw in real life happen in 2020. With, the COVID stuff, then normalization. And I part of what I like about his style is, he talks about Americans. I don't think he's demeaning, but he talks about like, getting kicked in our fat bottom and
Yes.
being flabby and like
Right.
fat.
Right.
He kind of has this like, life is too good for you guys, and it shows kind
Right.
of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's probably why he came here, because, life here is so much better. But then he gets here and he sees you're just ripe for the picking.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're 100% right. I think he probably, when he got here, he looked around like, well, you said numerous times so far
Yeah.
that we could never have imagined it go this well.
Right. That's right. That's sad. That's just very sad.
And then he chuckles about the Czechoslovakia in '68 when Brezhnev said, okay,
Right.
now is the period of normalization. Like,
Right.
the tanks are here and like this is going to be normal for this foreseeable future.
Yeah. Well, you know what that reminds me of, Brian? Right after COVID, there's all this sort of giddiness among the elites about what they could accomplish with crisis kinds of things. So, okay, we're gonna make the climate is the new COVID, and we're gonna control people this way, and we're going to impose. He talks about then the big brother from on high, Washington, D.C., imposing its will with the promise of protection, with the promise of goodies and this type of thing. So it reminds me of all of those types of things, because that's exactly, you can almost see the giddiness of the elite think tanks after COVID. I mean, you could see it, that we're going to just declare all these other things crisis. We're going to take these same normalization methods, that from now on, normal is going to be no propane stoves. It's going to be no gas cars. You're going to get shots all the time. All these different things are going to happen, but that's going to be called normal.
Well, and that Yoel Havari, or whatever his name is, that said that if you cut open a man, you don't find a soul, therefore a soul can't exist. Remember
Right.
that?
Yeah. From the WF.
Yeah. That humanitarian. He there's a clip of him saying like COVID was a great testing ground to get people open to the idea of having surveillance, not just external surveillance, but in the way he describes it, like where we would take substances that would allow people to see when we're telling the truth and when we're not, when we're angry and when we're not, like things like that. And like what?
Yeah. It's sci-fi
all
dystopia.
The deepest, darkest things that you can imagine, they've seen through these crises unfold, like the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
Okay, we took 9/11, the worst attack on U.S. soil in 70 years or whatever it was, 55 years, and we imposed legislation that is presented as a way to stop the terrorists, but really it was a U.S. Citizen Surveillance Act.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, it's pretty staggering that this process that he's describing 40 years ago, we've seen unfold in ways that I think he was impressed by how fast it happened back then. I would love to bring him back from the dead and say, what do you think now? What do you think now?
If he thought it was good in 1985, he would have to think it's on anabolic steroids in 2024.
2024, yeah, exactly.
All right, let's see what he's got next here. The next one's about a minute and a half also, and he's gonna tell us what's in store next.
Oh, great.
He will go to Moscow to kiss the bottoms of new generation of Soviet assassins.
Oh, sorry. Right there, he's talking about Walter Mondale, who was running for president in 84.
Yep,
he's the guy who only won the state of Minnesota. Reagan won 49 states. But anyhow, he's talking about if guys like Mondale, again, and Mondale by now would be considered a right-wing conspiracy guy.
Yes, he would, yeah.
Relative to today. But anyhow, that's who he's talking about here.
Never mind. He will create false illusions that the situation is under control. Situation is not under control. Situation is disgustingly out of control. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational system trains another generation of people who think they are living at a peacetime. False. The United States is in the state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system. And the initiator of this war is not Comrade Andropov, of course. It's the system. However ridiculous it may sound, the world communist system or the world communist conspiracy, whether I scare some people or not, I don't give a hoot. If you are not scared by now, nothing can scare you. But you don't have to be paranoid about it. What actually happens now, that unlike myself, you have literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to, unless you want to live in Antarctica with penguins. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility.
All right. So again, this is a concept that you and I have heard talked about probably recently. I would say in the last, probably since 2016 is when I first started hearing about this, with when Trump ran for office, especially after he was like this. Maybe 2015, but I didn't probably pay attention in 2015 because I wasn't really that engaged in politics and stuff like that then. But 2016 is the first time I remember, and maybe even 2018, for sure in 2020. But this idea of a world that what Yuri calls a world communist conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we're fighting, according to what he just said here. It's not Comrade Andropov.
Yeah.
It's not even the Soviet Union. It's this world communist. That just, like, again, nobody was saying those words in 1985. Nobody on a public stage was saying, like, we got to look out for the global cabal. Like, that was not a thing in 1985.
Right. No, it wasn't. I mean, it was, I mean, you almost go back and look at some of the things that like the Birch Society and the folks of the past, and that most people thought, well, these guys are really kind of wonky. They're kind of weird. But you look at some of those things now and you say, well, yeah, there really is something just beyond the current enemy that supports our, military industrial complex. There really is something beyond that that's global that is incredibly dangerous. To me, it's fascinating when he's talking in 84. I was thinking about this. He says, you don't have very much time left.
Right.
And what happened in 84 here? I mean, we really got Reagan, and we got, a reprieve, if you will.
A resurgence, of patriotism, for sure.
Yeah.
Because we had a little tiny sliver taste of the malaise of Jimmy Carter and all that kind of stuff. And we bounced.
Yep.
But
if you think, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of him again, but what's interesting about this to me is that if that was the fourth turning, if that was right then, 40 years ago, if it wasn't the third turning ish time then, if it was the fourth turning time then we probably wouldn't have had that same outcome. In other words, if we overlay this, if we overlay that on this period, we would probably get a much different outcome that would have been incredibly negative. So that kind of goes to this notion that we talk about periodically, that the times that we're in, this progression that we're in, there's what this conspiracy is attempting to do. What this, and it's really, I don't even know if you call it a conspiracy. You call it a completely different worldview.
Yeah,
it's a 100% different worldview. Says that our worldview is the individual matters, that self-determination matters, that freedom matters, that all these different things matter. The values that we hold that are, millennia developed values matter. The opposing worldview is completely opposed to all of those different things. That in terms of how this plays out is going to determine who the players are in a different age would come out in a different way, in a completely different way.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you and I have touched on this before, and, historians talk about this all the time. Like the percentage of human history where the individual had rights that actually mattered.
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's way less than it's like a fraction of 1%. It's way less than a quarter of 1%.
Right.
Where things like the Magna Carta actually had meaning, and the our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, the First Amendment. These are minuscule little periods of time compared to millennia of the global elites having complete dominion over huge pieces of the population. And maybe you had a Genghis Khan who had, control of 25% of the population, and a few other people control the other 75% or something like that, or whatever, or maybe even a couple hundred people control the other 75%. Still, the idea of like a society, back then where the individual had rights that were actually like meaningfully held up in a court of law or so like that, it's silly to think about that. So it's not like it's this conspiracy. It's human nature. When you have the ability, you want the power.
Yeah. That's really what we're saying. Oftentimes I think we talk about how the negative things are negative human nature, and what we're talking about is the best of the normal of human nature. Probably you could even flip that around and think, well, we're kind of the abnormal example of that. We're the abnormal
100%.
ones, because normally human nature is selfish and power seeking and doesn't care about its fellow human being and all that. I mean, you look at documents. One of the best constitutions on the planet is the Constitution of North Korea, in terms of things that are guaranteed to people. You got all these great guarantees and such, but it doesn't get enacted. So you get the Magna Carta, you get these various things that are put into place, and humans just default back to their most base nature. And that's really, well, and that again, I think to me that you extend that out, that gets back to the sort of the Judeo-Christian,
and why they hate Christians and Jews.
Exactly, because we contradict normal human nature, because this is a disinfectant for normal human nature to actually create a better society, at least as we see it.
Well, and to put others' needs before yours, as is part of the requirement to be a quote unquote good Christian or a good Jewish person, is to love your fellow man and treat them in kind ways and put their needs before yours in some cases and things like that. So I think it's a two-pronged offense that they take to the Judeo-Christian thing. One is it's counter to whoever has the means should have the control. So it's counter to that. And the second thing is it identifies a higher being who is the ultimate arbiter of good and evil that they would someday have to be answerable to. And that's got to be scary as hell.
Oh yeah, literally, yes. No, exactly right. And that both of those things stand in the way of them achieving of the most selfish people achieving their goals, even if their goals they believe are for the benefit of others because they look down on others.
Yeah. And it's not even just standing in the way, but having the nerve to attempt to stand in the way. Right. Just like whether or not you actually are successful in it is secondary. Like, who the hell do you think you are, you with your little pea brain, to come between me and this grand life that I'm destined to have?
Right. And the utopia that they honestly believe they're going to bring to the earth because they're smarter than the rest of us.
Yeah, that part I'm not so sure I'm sold on, that they actually believe that there's. But Yuri's giving me an education here, so let's see what else he's got. There's only 2 more segments left. This one here is a little longer. This is a little over 2 minutes, so bear with us if you're listening. I think this is fascinating. If it's boring, I apologize, but I think it's pretty fascinating to hear a guy give us the playbook 40 years in advance.
Exactly.
Okay, so what do we do? What is your recommendation to the American people?
Well, the immediate thing that comes to my mind is, of course, there must be a very strong national effort to educate people in the spirit of real patriotism, number one. Number two, to explain them the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever, welfare state, big brother government. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom, including freedoms to homosexuals, to prison inmate. All this freedom will vanish, evaporate in 5 seconds, including your precious lives. The second thing, the moment at least part of the United States population is convinced that the danger is real, they have to force their government. And I'm not talking about sending letters, signing petitions, and all this beautiful, noble activity. I'm talking about forcing United States government to stop aiding communism. Because there is no other problem more burning and urgent than to stop the Soviet military-industrial complex from destroying whatever is left of the free world. And it is very easy to do. No credits, no technology, no money, no political or diplomatic recognition, and of course no such idiocy as grain deals to USSR. The Soviet people, 270 millions of Soviets, will be eternally thankful to you if you stop aiding a bunch of murderers who sit now in Kremlin and whom President Reagan respectfully calls government. They do not govern anything, least of all such complexity as the Soviet economy. So two very simple, maybe too simplistic answers or solutions, but nevertheless they are the only solutions. Educate yourself, understand what's going on around you. You are not living at the time of peace. You are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself.
All right. So I thought it was interesting there, again, what was it, 89 when the Berlin Wall fell? So this, 4 years after he talks about this, like he's talking about, you got to stop funding communism. And the Soviet Union was the big communist back in 1985.
They're the powerful ones, yeah.
But as soon as I was listening to this earlier today, marking these little spots to pause it, I was thinking, I mean, how many years was it from the time the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union basically imploded until we started shipping all of our money to China? How many years? I mean, less than a decade, right?
Yeah, it was, because it was like the late 1990s.
Yeah, like 88, 98, something like that was when all this that was when Clinton was like, we're gonna bring them up to the world stage because they're gonna share our ideals, all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking, like, okay, again, I don't want to be too cynical. I really don't. I'm not trying to like make a case here, but it's like, wow, okay, we all regular Americans, the Berlin Wall falls, and we all celebrate, hey, we beat communism. Right. And within a decade, we find a bigger, badder communist country to send all of our money and all of our jobs and all of our manufacturing to. Yeah. We found a surrogate for the Soviet Union to support communism on the global scale.
Right. Well, and I think I guess it depends on how you take it. You could either take it, when China was admitted to the WTO, World Trade Organization, and we opened up to China, the idea that that people in Clinton's era and the elites at that time said, if we show them how great things are going to be, if they adopt our way of doing business, freedom's going to reign, and they're going to be all these different things are going to happen. So maybe you could say that they were idealistic, but didn't predict the future very well. Instead, what happened was they adopted the best of the economics that they could fit into their communist system, and they used the economic power that we essentially gave them by opening up the world to them to strengthen their communist empire. So, it was nation building.
And I think that there's an element that I would add in there. Again, I don't have any way to prove this, but I don't think I'm being too cynical when I say this. A step in there was those governments, specifically China probably, and others like it, because they have a system in place that allows them to extract dollars or money, not dollars, money from their citizens. They had pools of money available to pay our politicians and lawmakers to incentivize them to create laws that, quote unquote, helped China and modernize China and things like that. I think there's a critical step in there where people who were supposed to be representing our citizens got paid obscene amounts of money to sell us out.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. And this is where the long view of the communist regime in China, they're thinking, at least we're told, they're thinking in centuries long views, and we're thinking in, from one election to another, 4 years is a long time for us.
And only now, by the way, we were doing that, 15 years ago, we weren't even thinking that far in advance, probably.
Well, exactly. And so if China's thinking this far in advance, what they're thinking is, well, we can take as much advantage of them, make them think they'll play to our ego, they'll play to our greed, they'll play to, our aspiration, they'll play to all these things, and they'll use it then to build their own empire over a period of time, which is what we've seen happen.
Or just flat out buy people off and skip all that altruistic stuff.
Right. Well, absolutely. I mean, I think they play all the ends. I think they play,
I think so.
or all. I think they've got players doing every one of those things now. And frankly, the only thing that ultimately saves us is that our system is more productive than theirs. Even if they do that, it's hard to manage a 1.4 billion person or 1.3 billion person kind of economy and all that. And if so, they're very efficient and effective at what they do. Centralized control gives you that.
Yeah. All right. So there's about a minute and a half left here. He's going to wrap it up and with a little conclusion here, and let's see what he's got to say and by the way, this is a 13.5-minute clip out of like an hour and a half long interview. So there's if people want to see it, you just got to Google Yuri Bezmenov or put it in YouTube, and there's lots of stuff on this here.
You don't have much time, especially if you are talking about young generation. There's not much time left for convulsions to the beautiful disco music. Very soon it will go, just overnight. If we are talking about capitalists or wealthy businessmen, I think they are selling the rope on which they will hang very soon. If they don't stop, if they cannot curb their unsettled desire for profit, and if they keep on trading with the monster of the Soviet communism, they are going to hang very soon. And they will pray to be killed, but unfortunately they will be sent to Alaska probably to manage industry of slaves. It's simplistic. I know it sounds unpleasant. I know Americans don't like to listen to things which are unpleasant. But I have defected not to tell you the stories about such idiocy as microfilm, James Bond type espionage. This is garbage. You don't need any espionage anymore. I have come to talk about survival. It's a question of survival of this system. You may ask me, what is it in for me? Survival, obviously, because as I said, I am now in your boat. If we sing together, we'll sing beautifully together. There is no other place on this planet to defect to.
All right. So that's our friend Mr. Bezmenov sharing the info. So two things he said we had to do at the end. One, we've got to start educating young people about the benefits of capitalism, open markets, democracy, those kinds of things, and the negatives of communism, socialism, Marxism, Leninism, all the isms there, and stop funding global communist regimes. So in the last 39 years, Dave, how would you assess our progress on those two fronts?
We failed in both fronts. I mean, look at how much money we send around. I mean, let's just take Iran, right? I mean, how much money have we put in their pocket when they're committed to our ultimate destruction? We do this over and over again. We open up the world to China, the WTO and free trade and all this. We open up, our pocketbooks to Iran, ship pallets full of money to say, now be nice. We're sending you money. Be nice. And you pick whatever you want. And then of course, look at the education system and the things that are being promulgated. Are we promulgating the benefits of the free market and how the free market has lifted more people out of slavery? I mean, we're told that we are an irretrievably, irredeemably racist and evil country. But the reality is the facts that don't penetrate, of course, are that because of our free market economy and the power we've developed as a result of that, we've freed more people from slavery than any other nation in the history of Earth. But that again, so in both of those places, yes, we failed. We failed.
And I think that they're both things you could easily point to and say that after the crisis ends, they happen probably in the blink of an eye. Overnight, where there's immediate patriotism and immediate anybody who's not for us is against us, and they are absolutely pariahs and outcasts. Like imagine being a communist in 1946. I mean that had to be pretty uncomfortable, right?
Yes, exactly.
And the crisis will not allow us to have the surplus funds to fund these other regimes.
Right, exactly.
I would imagine that's part of it as well. So it's interesting. It kind of feels like after listening to him, and I know we're about out of time, but after listening to him talk about how this global communist, what he calls global communist conspiracy, and you and I talk about how they move, thinking about, hundreds of years at a time. Like they're making their strategies are based on centuries.
Right.
Ours are based on years or election cycles.
Yes, exactly.
It almost feels like the fourth turning in the cycle we go through is almost like kind of like the earthquakes that happen as those two different strategies unfold simultaneously. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we do things that kind of upset the global thing, and the global thing kind of does, global glacial movement kind of upsets what we do, and this friction builds, and like an earthquake, it kind of springs out. It's kind of after listening to him to explain it, it's kind of what it feels like to me anyway.
Well, it's a recurrent millennial, mini millennium long, conflict, and it will continue again, and it gets reset periodically with a crisis, and that's what we're facing now.
Yeah. All right. Well, usually I would say if you think Dave or I got something right or wrong, let us know. But in this case, I'm going to say if you think Yuri Brezmenov got something right or wrong, he's not around to defend himself, so I guess you can choose to do it if you want or not. But anyhow, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you think that our commentary or analysis on this is incorrect, we'd love to hear it. If you think we got it right, love to hear that too. You can go to unsilentpodcast.com, check out the comment section, the Rumble channel. It's a good place to do that there. Until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.